despite a new law from Congress requiring DOJ to release all its Epstein files by Friday, that's not going to happen. What's being released now, sources tell us, is less than half of the files. In this initial release, never-before-seen records from the investigation. Thousands of photos.
Welcome.
Good to see you and your
Congressperson Ro Khanna in the building, everybody. All right, so yeah, it's a SM7B. I'm sure you've done a lot of these before, so you got to speak directly into the microphone.
I got you.
Welcome. This is your third time on the stream.
But the first time in your studio.
Yeah, the first time
ever. Which is
ever.
all in like Christmas holiday spirit. I didn't know that. I didn't know you had the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, I waged for many years. I waged a war against Christmas as a Muslim American, and I decided to give up on it. I'm the most. I'm presenting myself as a lover of Christ because I feel like the environment has shifted quite a bit.
Well, Christmas is a great holiday.
I love it.
Who doesn't like Santa Claus and Nutcracker and the Christmas Carol
or gift giving
and gift giving?
It's commodity consumption. I love that.
I mean, I'm a big. I mean, I grew up celebrating. I'm of Hindu faith, but it's. I think it's one of the great times.
I think Americans have nailed it on how to do holidays because like everything that they do revolves around getting the family together, eating a lot of food, watching something on TV.
You're American.
Well, yes. Well,
you refer to it as a third person
sometimes because I did grow up in Turkey. My whole family is still in Turkey, so I
just don't want to give quarter to Trump or something here.
No, I know. I'm an American citizen. I was born here.
Yeah.
I'm an anchor baby, so. For now, my citizenship is not called in the question, even though it gets called in the question all the time. Laura Loomer constantly
she hates me. She hates me.
Yeah. Oh, she's gonna lose her mind today. Then
it's like two of us. Oh my gosh, she's probably gonna say that Qatar is funding this.
Yeah, of course.
Every tweet starts out with Qatar is funding it. I mean, doesn't matter whether you're going after the generals in the military or whatever. Yeah. That's like your standard line.
Every time I'm like, Qatar, please fund me. What are you doing? I'm out here. I'm waiting for the money. No, I'm just kidding. This is obviously a very important day, as is every other day. But thank you for coming on today. We're going to be talking about the initiative that you and Thomas Massie were championing in Congress.
Championing. We're not giving up.
And still are championing that had a very unique moment yesterday. Do you mind talking about the act for those that might not know what it is? Also, do you want anything to drink?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm gonna grab a Diet Dr. Pepper for myself real quick. But while I'm right here, you explain it.
Well, look, these are over 1,200 women who, as young girls, were raped or abused. There was a rape island that Epstein had set up. And rich and powerful men, powerful politicians, powerful business folks would go to this island, and either they would rape these underage girls or they'd be standing by as you would see paraded there a 15-year-old, 14-year-old who would stick out as a sore thumb. And everyone knew they were underage, and they did nothing. They covered it up. Or they trafficked in women who may have been 21, 22, but they paid for it and abused them. And what we want to know is who were these rich and powerful people? And how do they have such a hold on our government that they prevented prosecution and investigation? One of the files that came out yesterday showed that there was someone who complained to the FBI in 1996 saying that Jeffrey Epstein had photos of 12 and 16-year-olds being nude. And the FBI said nothing, did nothing. Why? Yeah. Who are these people? So Thomas Massie and I passed a bill. I mean, I can go through how Herculean it was. We had to overcome Trump. We had to overcome Johnson. We had to overcome skepticism in both of our parties. We had to overcome the Epstein class, the billionaires who didn't want this coming out. But we persevered.
The New York Times editorial board that was like, "Hey, let's not do this." Actually,
yeah. I mean,
so many outlets in mainstream media, so many editorial boards in major legacy publishers were just like, "Hey, now let's not release this stuff." Actually,
they called me. They kept all these journalists who kind of like my economic policy and me and think of me as a serious person. Said I'm a conspiracy theorist because I was leading this. And they'd say, "Oh, how's your friend, the vice president? He and you are both conspiracy theorists." I don't know what happened to the vice president because he was the one who was out there saying we should release these files. Suddenly he's gone quiet. Anyway, Massey and I, we overcame all the establishment opposition. We forced a vote. We got 70 Republicans to break with Donald Trump and say they were going to vote for us. We flipped Donald Trump. He ended up endorsing our bill and caving to the Congress. We got 100 senators. Schumer had to introduce my bill in the Senate for unanimous consent a week after I'd called on him to step down from the Senate. So we got the whole process working. President signs the bill, and this means they've got to finally release the files. And then we see yesterday, they don't release 90% of what they're supposed to release.
And what's interesting is, from what I understand, you were aware that this could potentially happen, right? So there was language in the act that Donald Trump signed into law that specifically detailed certain things that the Department of Justice could do, including if there were any sort of significant redactions, they had to walk through exactly why they were redacting. And from what we understand now, there were over 200 Department of Justice lawyers that went through and engaged in significant redactions. The BBC's estimation was that apparently 90% of the files were redacted, somewhere along those lines. Hold on. Kaya.
He's hungry?
She's hungry for love, but she'll get a lot of fur on you. So I'm going to, Kaya, place.
What type of dog?
She's a mix, but she's a mix of a bunch of different things. She's a big lady. But as I was saying, Donald Trump's former defense attorney, now Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, actually released a memo as well to Republican congressperson, from what I understand, saying that politically active or politically involved persons were also redacted. Yeah, similar to the 1,200 plus victims. And
that's outrageous. I mean, look, they are redacting information to basically protect people who are in the government or in politics or in business. And if you look at the law, we explicitly say you can't redact things to protect people's reputation or if it's going to cause embarrassment. They're doing exactly the opposite of what the law says. And then, the two documents we wanted out. One was a 60-count indictment of Jeffrey Epstein, because the 60-count indictment never saw the light of day, and it was ultimately 2 counts he was charged on, but there were 60 counts. Now, why do we want that document? Because that document will talk about how he made all his illegal money. How did this guy make $500 million? Who was paying him? Who were the other men involved with him? They didn't release that. They didn't release the prosecution memo justifying that indictment, the draft indictment. All of those draft indictments and prosecution memo got buried. And in our law, which you got up there, we say specifically all internal DOJ communications, including memos, notes, decisions to charge or not to charge, investigate or decline to investigate. Specifically, that language was for getting these 2 documents, and they're basically disobeying the law. And by the way, this isn't even, what's so scary to me is it's not just concealing Trump's name. I expected that they would try to eliminate the Trump name. They're protecting something else here. They're protecting rich and powerful interests going well beyond Donald Trump. That's what has me the most concerned. Like, what is it that they're trying to protect, and why are they trying to protect it?
Yes. So there's obviously the thing that a lot of people are hyper invested in here, which is, of course, the worst crime, the international sex trafficking of minors that took place. But then beyond that, there's obviously a lot of paper trail and a lot of financial crimes that took place as well, and a lot of very connected, very wealthy individuals that were Jeffrey Epstein associates. And we simply want to figure out, like, what level of involvement did they have? Not every single person, I suspect, that was pictured around Jeffrey Epstein was engaging in the worst of all crimes. That's not my assessment of this at all. But I do fear that just as you said, that is precisely what they're trying to protect here. That's precisely what they're trying to hide. Now, I have a bunch of questions. Why do you think that they actually sheltered the public from the initial plea bargain deal, for example, like the other details that came out about how the first time Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and prosecuted, there was this, there was this trial that took place, and Trump's former labor secretary, Alexander Acosta, was the prosecutor on the case, who offered him a sweetheart plea bargain that no pedophile has ever gotten since or ever will, where he was allowed to be released on work release while he was in prison. That's insane.
He abused people while he was released. I mean, that's how horrific this was.
So that was, that was one of the major things that I was invested in, that I wanted to find out about. Why do you think they're openly hiding this side of the Jeffrey Epstein profile?
But because they know there was a huge amount of wrongdoing. That's one of the reasons we wanted that initial indictment draft, because there were supposed to be 60 counts, and all those 60 counts would be exposed. Acosta prosecuted 2 counts.
Yeah.
He got rid of all the 58. Then he does the plea bargain deal. We wanted to see the memos, what went into the decision to say that that was reasonable. And I'm sure there are dissenting opinions of people who said, absolutely not. We wanted to see that email correspondence, those memos. They're hiding this because they know that they're rich and powerful people who intervened. Yeah. And they know that justice was not done, not just because of Epstein, not just because of Maxine
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell. You'd think I know it by now. Ghislaine Maxwell. I always get the name messed up. Ghislaine Maxwell. But it was done because of rich and powerful men.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the financial elite that's obviously very connected to Jeffrey Epstein in ways that we already know, in broad daylight, constantly in and out of like these meetings, constantly photographed with him, some of which the House Oversight Committee has actually released, like the Democratic Oversight Committee has released as well, partially from, I believe, the Epstein, what is it called? Not the manor, but like the data dumps that came, the photographic dumps that came are not just from the investigation, right? Like the estate, the Epstein estate.
They're two different things.
Yeah. So can you describe that?
There's the law that requires the Justice Department to release them.
Yeah.
And then there's the letter that I sent to the estate saying we got to release that information. And Comer, who's the Republican chair, subpoenaed him because of Summer Lee's work and Robert Garcia's work. And they are releasing information. So there are 2 places we're getting this information from.
Yeah, and so a lot of the photos that were coming out from the Oversight Committee were coming from the estate, from if I recall correctly, and yet some of those files that would definitely be in the investigation, in the Jeffrey Epstein files, right, from the court proceedings, are redacted. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this invited a lot of scrutiny, a lot of suspicion that the Department of Justice had actively redacted Donald Trump and many other high-profile players in American politics from the initial file release. One of the things that they ended up doing, and I suspected that initially they would most likely just offer a little bit of red meat to the base and say like, oh, look, see Bill Clinton.
Right.
And they did do that. And I also suspected that they would be so incompetent, as they have been over and over again, that they would still somehow find a way to fuck it up, which they did, right? And the oversight Dems actually called this out. Yesterday, we found out, alongside the rest of the internet, when the files were being released, there was one photo that actually made it through the censors. And one photo of Trump that made it through the censors. But it was a photo that was in a drawer, so I guess like
they didn't notice
whatever.
it.
Yeah, they did not notice that Donald Trump was in some of the files, and what the Department of Justice, from what we understand now, did was when they realized that Donald Trump was in this photo, they just deleted it. It's
well, the cover up is always worse than the crime. Someone probably thought, oh, am I going to get in trouble with Trump or the Trump White House? And it's absurd. I mean, look, this is the issue that is unraveling in part his presidency. This is the only issue where the MAGA base is brazenly defying him. Why?
Yeah.
Because he said that he was going to expose these people. He said that he was going to expose these corrupt people who get one set of justice, who raped young girls, and he's going to bring justice. He's not a perfect person. No one thinks that Donald Trump has led a perfect life, but they thought he was actually going to expose these folks and return government to people. And he's betrayed that promise. And that's why you look at my X feed. I encourage folks to just go and look at the X feed. I've got more MAGA supporters standing up for me than I ever have in my entire political career.
Yeah.
They're staking my side over Pam Bondi's side. They're going after the DOJ, saying you're killing Donald Trump's presidency. And so this issue, everyone says we got to take the fight to Trump, take the fight to Trump. They all do memes against it, call him a fascist, call him a dictator. No one has actually been able to break the MAGA coalition. The reason Massey and I have actually been able to break the MAGA coalition is because we're actually saying we're on the people's side instead of the system side, that the system is rotten. That's what you got to do as a first principle for the Democratic Party. The system is rotten. Too much big money, too much influence of wealthy people, too many people who are getting away with things, and that we're going to be on the side of the people against this rotten system. And that was what Trump was saying, but he hasn't delivered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is, from my analysis, it almost feels like this is one of the purest expressions of like class politics that Americans can get on board with. It's not dialectics, it's not materialist at all, but it is like something that they have seen or something that they've suspected. There's obviously a lot of conspiracy around this sort of stuff. Like this was the whole motivating principle around QAnon, right? Or Pizzagate or numerous other conspiracies that were not true at all. But now what I am seeing is that there are some people who see that this is valid as opposed to the previous formations of these sorts of conspiracy theories. There is evidence on this. Unlike people who claim that these super wealthy people were communicating with one another and like using code words for child pornography or ordering children off of Wayfair or whatever. They were pretty brazen. They were pretty open about like Jeffrey Epstein. There's stuff that came out from the files that Jeffrey Epstein was mad at someone that was redacted that was procuring children for him, and they were over the age of 18, and he was like demanding to see their licenses to make sure that they were under the age of 18. They weren't
sick,
they were not using coded language at all. They were pretty flagrant. They were pretty blatant about.
They controlled the law enforcement. They thought if the FBI is not even investigating it, what do they have to worry about?
Exactly.
I mean, there are documents saying, I have a woman for you. I have a girl for you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just sickening stuff. And 1,200 victims. For anyone who says, there's not other rich and powerful people who are involved, I said, one person is not abusing 1,200 people. Just the math doesn't work up. There are other people who are on that rape island who either watched young girls be paraded around or raped them. And, the reason this is, I think, resonant is people feel an anger that they've lost their economic voice. They don't control their own political voice. There's something that's wrong with the system. And this is like the symbol of what's wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a perfect demonstration of like how the super wealthy get away with doing heinous crimes while simultaneously controlling the levers of power, right? And I think that's the reason why a lot of people, this is a bipartisan thing, and not bipartisan in the sense that like politicians are on board with it, but this is a bipartisan issue in the eyes of the public. And as you also suggested, as you also correctly pointed out, I believe it's Donald Trump's least popular issue with his base, 54% disapproval, as opposed to everything else where the MAGA base basically is 80% approval rating on anything that Donald Trump is doing, with the exception of this, where there's a 54% disapproval. So it's pretty significant. And one of the angles that I wanted to cover here, however, that I feel like the media is noticeably absent on or omitting is the potential the potential connection with not just the super wealthy, but like intelligence, right? I know I'm sure you've seen the drop site reporting on this stuff, because there was Jeffrey Epstein's JE Vacation email address was leaked, was hacked, and his entire correspondence with world leaders and everyone else was leaked for all to see. And there has been very little coverage on this from the legacy publishers. unfortunately. And the only time I ever hear about this connection between Jeffrey Epstein and potentially Israeli intelligence, even though he is very clearly connected to Ehud Barak, and we knew about this even before the emails as well, and numerous other high-profile world leaders. The only time legacy media covers this is to say it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy. It's to say, oh, this suggestion is so ridiculous. And I believe Thomas Massey also brought this up yesterday, where he said a big part of the reason why there is this major cover-up is because it is very likely that Jeffrey Epstein was connected in some way, shape, or form to our intelligence and also to Israeli intelligence as well. Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, my opinion is that that's why we need the release of the files. That's why this was drafted in a way that would get the FBI files, that would get the national security files. That's why the lawyers of the survivors say you need all the files, the financial files, the national security files, the FBI files, and anything that isn't a current national security issue. So we even drafted it saying you can't overclassify information. If there's not a significant, clear national security threat, then it has to be declassified. So this will put to rest the issue is if we could have transparency, if the American people can see the files.
Yeah.
And if they can't see the files, then conspiracies will continue to grow, whether true or not. And so I guess even the legacy media should be just calling for the release of the files.
Yeah. And there is this somewhat elitist attitude, I feel like, that at least I've seen. I have tremendous respect for many journalists that I know and love that work at these outlets that want to do very good work and oftentimes do very good work. But overall, I feel like the editorial teams and the way that they respond to this kind of stuff is to simply say, "Oh, the public doesn't know how to handle this information," and I think that's a dangerous line of thinking in general. The idea that people are too stupid to understand what's going on. But I do think that invites additional scrutiny, and that actually invites a lot of conspiracy theories, many of which can go down a dangerous path and actually do become anti-Semitic conspiracy theories if the truth is not assessed by credible actors and investigative reporters. So I always appreciate what DropSite is doing in terms of doing that investigation, that investigative reporting, and that work. There are, connections between Jeffrey Epstein and obviously Ehud Barak. There's connections between Jeffrey Epstein and people that were possibly involved in Iran-Contra that just recently came out. And I guess one of the questions I have for you is there was another statement that Thomas Massey made that he said 20 to 25 people, if they are not outed as being co-conspirators or as being engaged with Jeffrey Epstein in some way, shape, or form, by the time Friday comes around, that means that there will have been heavy redaction in direct violation of the act that was passed.
Correct.
Have you guys actually seen the unredacted files?
We have not. We've requested to see them. In fact, one of the things that Thomas and I were discussing today is putting together a committee of Congress, me, him, maybe someone from the Judiciary Committee, to go and look at these files, even if it's in a classified setting, to be able to say what complies and what doesn't comply. Because right now, they have shown no good faith in complying. And the reality is we know that the survivors' lawyers have seen the files. And they have told us, and the survivors have told us, that there are other powerful men who either abused or raped these girls or showed up on the rape island while these girls were being abused. I mean, it's not hard to visualize. Think of a party. You got a lot of models, some of them in their 20s, and then you've got like this young girl walking around nude who's 14 or 15, and all these rich, powerful men there. Now, my view is every man there is guilty if they didn't say something in terms of abetting abuse. And so it's not just men who actually abused or raped these girls. It's also people who were showing up to these sick parties knowing that young girls were being paraded around. And that's the type of information that we're going to get if we get that 60-count indictment, if we get the 82-page memo that the prosecutions wrote, and if we get the FD forms, the FBI forms of interviews of all of the men who were interviewed by the FBI to understand what happened. I mean, how do you have a situation of a release where no one else's names are in there being investigated? Obviously, if there are 1,200 victims, even if the FBI concluded that some of these people were innocent or not guilty, they would have interviewed them. They would have been witnesses. There would have been questions. Where is all that stuff?
No, absolutely. I guess redacted, or they haven't even released many of the files yet, right? Like there's still so much that they are very clearly going through to hit the heavy-handed redaction that they did to the first tranche of data that they were forced to release, even though that was also in violation of the act that was passed. So my question, and I'm sure everyone else's question here, is what are the next steps here?
Well, there are a few steps. First of all, obviously, impeachment is on the table for Pam Bondi. There is criminal prosecution that she could face, or others at the Justice Department could face. And by the way, that criminal prosecution risk runs well beyond this administration. The next administration, in my view, it can't just be kumbaya. There needs to be accountability for crimes committed, accountability for crimes committed with ICE, accountability for crimes committed in the Caribbean where innocent boatmen are being killed, and accountability for crimes committed in not complying with Massey and my Epstein Transparency Act. Accountability is going to be needed. But Massey and I are also in the process of drafting a bill for the inherent contempt of Congress. What does that mean? Pam Bondi could be fined every day if she's not agreeing to release these documents. And we're going to propose a group of people in Congress, a bipartisan group that gets to review these documents so that we can assess what is a legitimate redaction and what is not, and actually have her comply with the law. Because my goal is not retribution. It's not to score a point against the president's cabinet. My goal is justice for these survivors and actually figuring out how we get these documents out. One point, I think this first run may have been a test, them just seeing, okay, what can we get away with? And the outcry that it's come out, hopefully this pushes them to realize this, that they're not done with this. Just the before Christmas release isn't working. Yeah. That there's going to be more demand for these documents to actually come out.
Yeah. So that's one angle for sure. And I think that there is a lot of appetite across the board, across the political spectrum for some kind of transparency in all of this. Clearly, if that wasn't the case, then Donald Trump wouldn't have signed this act into law to begin with, right? And they have mishandled this process, absolutely. I guess what are the next steps? Not to throw curveballs here, but like, what are the next steps if like Donald Trump offers a blanket pardon across the board to everyone that's mishandling this or deliberately redacting things in violation of the law?
Well, he could do that, and it would make it harder for them to be prosecuted in the future. But, do you really want to be a career Justice Department official or even appointee having as the capstone on your career being pardoned by Donald Trump for protecting pedophiles? I mean, that's really what people will be choosing. And then it'll be the next administration that releases all of this. But we are not giving up, because the reason I believe it's possible to shift the administration is we shifted Trump from calling it a hoax to signing the bill, because the one thing he can read is public opinion. Yeah. And he saw that this was going to be a huge story. It was hurting his presidency. In fact, he kept saying, I don't know why we keep talking about Epstein. I want to talk about all my achievements. He knew it was the Achilles heel, the kryptonite of his administration. And so now he's going to realize that this was another whiff by Pam Bondi. Susan Wild said it. She keeps whiffing. I don't know. She's so out of touch. She was supposed to meet the survivors. And then she said, I've got an appointment. I can't meet the survivors.
Yeah. There was one thing that I also wanted to bring up with Pam Bondi's inconsistency in the way that she's actually talked about this, because obviously initially when they got together and did this like fake release of the Epstein files with all of the MAGA influencers, right, and that was a major W. Like they thought that this would satiate people's appetite for the truth, right? And very clearly, it was all the stuff that we had access to already. And I think they thought that the people would just not demand more, where they were like, oh yeah, we're tuned in. We saw this, libs of TikTok was celebrating that they got this tranche of data. Yeah. But in the process, there were certain things that Pam Bondi had said that we now know are absolutely untrue. The notion, for example, that a lot of the CSAM that was in the Epstein files was commercially bought CSAM. We now know that there is, we now know that that's probably not true, right? Because there is a lot of not just redacted, but like CSAM slips that are all over the Epstein files that were released. Obviously, they're not going to digitize copies of child sexual abuse material, but like it's very clear that that was a hard copy that wasn't actually like digitally acquired or anything like that. There's instances where Jeffrey Epstein personally is actually like procuring or creating CSAM as well with 14-year-old victims, and the notion that this was the notion that this was just Jeffrey Epstein's doing, that he was just simply procuring all of this stuff for himself, is very clearly untrue. So that inconsistency, does that reach the boundaries of perjury? I mean, or does that only happen if Pam Bondi is in front of Congress, I guess?
The biggest thing is she's obstructed justice. She can be impeached because she didn't comply with the law. I mean, that's the obstruction of justice, and that's grounds for impeachment, is grounds for criminal prosecution. She also lied, right? I mean, she stood up in front of the country and said, there's nothing more to see. We've released everything.
Yeah.
And by their own admission, they're releasing hundreds of thousands of more documents. What changed?
Yeah.
How did they suddenly find all these documents? By the way, there are 300 gigabytes of files on the Epstein files. How do I know this? Because Kash Patel in front of Congress said there are 300 gigabytes, and they've released yesterday 2.5 gigabytes. So you can do the math. I mean, they've got hundreds of thousands more documents. And what are these documents? All the interviews. They're 1,200 survivors, all the interviews that they were conducting, all the other men who were on the island, all the other men who participated in this. I mean, we don't want just random documents. We don't want just random files. We don't want just random photos. We want to know who was on that island, who knew about these young girls being raped, who engaged in either rape or abuse or sex on that island. I mean, that's all that information is in those FBI witness interview FD files.
Yeah. Also, what level of involvement did Steve Bannon have, for example, another Trump affiliate that we know was deeply connected to Jeffrey Epstein? And there's a lot of inconsistency in the way that he's also presented himself here. At first, after Julie K. Brown's investigative reporting at the Miami Herald,
she's terrific.
She's amazing. When the second Epstein trial was starting, Bannon actually went to Jeffrey Epstein and conducted these interviews in the form of deposition training and to do PR. And then when the attitude shifted against Jeffrey Epstein even more than it had, he very quickly turned around and said, "Oh, I'm just shooting a documentary," right? But there are so many photos of Steve Bannon being chummy with Jeffrey Epstein. Why is none of that in the investigation? Why was that redacted? I mean, this is not even Donald Trump at that point. This is a totally, supposedly unaffiliated person. So, like, why is the Department of Justice not only sheltering Donald Trump, but sheltering Trump allies who are political operatives themselves? I mean, that's not a matter of national security, right?
No, they're sheltering rich and powerful people, just like they're sheltering the survivors. I mean, the whole point of the Epstein Act was that we want to know who these rich and powerful people were. Yeah. That they weren't charged. Usually the Justice Department doesn't release things on people who weren't charged because they figure, well, your reputation shouldn't be destroyed if you weren't charged. But in this case, we know that the process was corrupt. We know that the law enforcement couldn't be trusted. Yeah. We know that they didn't follow the FBI tips, that we know that they didn't prosecute. So in this case, the American public is saying we do want everything out there because the justice system let these women down. Yeah, justice delayed is justice denied, and the justice has been delayed. And the further they, the further that the Department of Justice tries to engage in this cover up, they're only expanding on the injustice that they participated in early on. So what do you
this is actually a good question. What would you think is like a solid example of a legitimate national security hypothetical for you? What would be a real example of like a national security concern that they engage in some sort of redaction on?
Well, look, if there was actually some conversation where it would expose someone who is a spy or a CIA agent and expose who they are and their identity, or expose their family, you don't want to put people at risk who are in those roles. If Epstein happened to know something, because he knew a lot of powerful people, about our national secrets in terms of our sensitive weapons or sensitive information, you wouldn't want that out there. So I can see there being, or if there were some comments made about a foreign leader, that you don't want the American president to be exposed in that way, or another country thinking something. So there are cases, and we can debate what those cases are. People often say, why did you not write the bill in a way that said everything has to come out and not even have an exception for classified information? And anyone who's been in Congress more than a day will tell you there's no chance anything like that would pass. There are too many people in Congress who'd just find that as the excuse. Khanna and Massey want to get rid of classified information. So we'd had the narrowest possible classified drafting to be able to get that bill through.
Okay. So that, for the record, that in and of itself, though, I think does lend even further credence to the suspicion that there was like some kind of involvement with the intelligence communities, which is one of the prevailing narratives that is often left unaddressed, like I said, with the exception of mainstream outlets just simply calling this a conspiracy theory. But obviously it goes beyond that as well. There are people who are not, CIA affiliated that are being sheltered here very clearly. There's also Donald Trump being sheltered here with the redactions, as we have seen from the actions that the Department of Justice took after people realized that they failed to redact some of the Donald Trump photos. And this is this is so silly, right? But as far as the potential involvement of Israel, are you familiar with the drop site reporting on this stuff?
I am. Ryan Graham and drop site. I'm well familiar.
So you're familiar with the back and forth correspondence that has taken place. I mean, even with these files, there was one photo with David Blaine doing. Hold on, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. David Blaine doing magic tricks in a room with Jeffrey Epstein and also former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. Former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, had also, is it David Copperfield? I thought it was David Blaine. Anyway, here it is. Magic tricks, performing magic tricks for Jeffrey Epstein. Is this David Copperfield? Am I wrong? I don't know. One of the magic guys. Performing magic tricks for Epstein and a few notable names, including Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Ehud Barak. And the question I have, no, that is David Blaine. Okay, you guys are... Copperfield also did it as well. I don't know why everyone is so worried about who the magician is here. I'm not implying that the magician is the important figure in this. Okay. Anyway, even though both were involved in different ways, doesn't matter. So it's things like this. It's things like this that people understandably want answers for. Do you feel like omitting this kind of stuff or refusing to talk about this kind of stuff is adding on to the scrutiny that people have for mainstream media nowadays?
Yeah, I think it all should come out. And we've drafted, that's why the classified exception we drafted was the narrowest possible way, that you have to justify it. It can't be excessively used. It can't be used to cover up what actually took place. And we drafted it with the narrowest way, in a way that could still pass the Congress. Because the reality is, if the bill doesn't pass the Congress, there's no use to it. But that is why what we're saying is that there needs to be people like Massey and me who get to see these documents, and then we can have a yes or no vote on, is it truly something redacted because it's going to protect the survivors or families or protect certain classified information, or should this be out there? My view is, if you don't have this out there, that's how you, as you pointed out, have conspiracy theories take hold. I mean, if there's nothing to hide, put it out there. Let people make that determination. By the way, the biggest thing that could be out there is the indictment, the 60-page indictment.
Yeah.
So people know, okay, was there foreign involvement? I mean, that indictment will say that right there. If there was no evidence in that indictment of foreign interest, that would be a big tell that, okay, maybe there wasn't there. If the indictment says, look, here are the 60 counts and here are the things that were happening from overseas, that would be a big issue. That's why we explicitly
Wait,
drafted.
this is the indictment for the second investigation or the first one?
This is the 60-page indictment, 60-count indictment that the assistant U.S. attorney in Florida put together in 2007.
Oh,
That Acosta ignored and then charges just 2 counts. Those are 60 counts. You don't have 60 counts just of pedophilia. You have 60 counts of money laundering and transactions. We want to see all of that. And that will get to the questions that you've been asking.
So that the other side of the story also is Alexander Acosta is out there, you know? Like, he is out there. Is there any demand to maybe pull him in front of Congress? Is that something that you guys can entertain? Because, like, he was the labor secretary at the time.
He came before the Oversight Committee, but it's just not, I don't think we can believe him. I mean,
so because there is the famous secondhand there was some reporting in the media at the time that when he was labor secretary and he resigned because of the Epstein stuff. There was this question where he was like, oh, well, at the time, someone led me to believe that he was actually intelligent, someone from higher up, because there was also a subsequent federal investigation that was taking place. And there were a lot of co-conspirators that actually were sheltered from the law in what seemingly was even beyond the sweetheart plea bargain that we've seen. Like, there's no instance where there's this virtual RICO case almost where you can where you find so many people who are criminally liable potentially for financial crimes and potentially for sex crimes as well, trafficking of minors, where all of the other people that were engaging in these acts are not only given blanket protection, blanket immunity, but we don't even know who they are as unindicted co-conspirators at all. Like, it's unimaginable, it's unheard of.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm seeing some of the questions. It says it's a great thing. You get instantaneous feedback. One, why is there no enforcement mechanism? There is. The enforcement mechanism is the obstruction of justice. You don't have to put in. This is one of the big misconceptions out there. Anyone who doesn't who violates a congressional law by definition is obstructing justice where Congress has asked it for justice purposes and can be face decades in prison for that. So the question is not, is there an enforcement mechanism? It's, are we going to actually have it enforced? And if it's not going to be enforced by this administration, it needs to be enforced by the next one. Mm-hmm. The second point is that Acosta should be prosecuted if if there's clear evidence of perjury. I mean, you can't come in and lie to Congress.
Well, now he has a cushy job at Newsmax, because I've been following his career. It's very interesting, going from Florida prosecutor upstart to like labor secretary under Donald Trump to then resigning in disgrace, or at least like trying to quietly exit the Trump administration when the Epstein stuff was coming back to the forefront, only to now sit on the board, I believe, of Newsmax. That's what he's doing now.
And look, there's got to be an accountability of what did he know? But the reason it's so hard to prosecute all these individuals and hold them accountable is we don't have the files. So, there's got to be the evidence of what came out. And then we can say, okay, now we know that someone was lying or not lying.
Absolutely. So there is also the question of Kash Patel. Didn't Patel say that there were no other individuals that could be charged in front of Congress? There is also...
How does he know that? I mean, the survivors don't believe that. Do they think that all 1,200 survivors were raped and abused by Epstein? Of course not. There were other people involved.
And they themselves, according to Thomas Massey, who has spoken to the lawyers of many of the survivors, say that there is at least 20 to 25 people that are supposed to be in the first tranche of data that came out, that was supposed to come out yesterday, were supposed to be outed.
That was the whole point of the
Yeah.
release, and not a single person. We don't have any single information about someone who was engaged in the abuse or cover up of the abuse beyond Maxwell and Epstein, and that's why this thing is a farce, and that's why Massey and I are upping the ante, saying we will use all our powers, whether it's inherent contempt, whether it is impeachment, whether it's referral for prosecution. The reality is that Massey and I have been effective on this issue because we have cracked the MAGA coalition, because it's bipartisan, because we're taking on a corrupt system. And by the way, this is a corrupt system that has led to billionaires accumulating value. We need to have a billionaire tax in this country, a wealth tax. It's led to overseas wars. We shouldn't be bombing people, innocent people on boats in the Caribbean. It led this kind of corrupt system to the Iraq War, which was wrong. It led to us at 20 years in Afghanistan. It led to the overthrow of Libya, which was a total foreign policy blunder. It led to supporting of Netanyahu and the genocide which the Israeli government committed in Gaza, and a blank check. And I was one of the few politicians who stood up and said no to the $14 billion, and who has gotten on Delia Ramirez's bill to say block military sales to Netanyahu's government, and who's gotten on Rashida Tlaib's resolution to say that what the Israeli government did was a genocide. But the point of all of this is, if we are not going to have politicians willing to tell the truth when it comes to things like Epstein, how do you expect them to tell the truth about issues of foreign policy? How do you expect them to tell the truth about issues of economic policy? The currency of modern politics should be courage and truth-telling, not just charisma and memes. Are you going to stand for principle in this country?
Yeah, it's the media landscape and the people's attitude has changed quite dramatically since the first time we had a conversation at the DNC. If you recall, you were one of the congresspersons leading the charge against Israel. And even then there was a lot of restraint for, saying certain things about Israel back then that many Democrats didn't even broach, obviously. And I think that played a role in the Democrats losing.
It did play a role. It's not a thing.
Yeah,
the data shows that.
So that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. This is not to the same degree of severity as the Epstein redactions, but Ken Martin recently said that they would not release the autopsy or the assessment that came out about how the Kamala Harris campaign, how the Democrats lost to Donald Trump. How do you feel about that?
Well, they should obviously release it. I mean, it's just kind of arrogance to not release it. But I'm not, I'm not crying a river, because that autopsy was done by consultants, and I'm not sure that I need to listen to DC consultants about what we did wrong. I'd rather be out there in the community. That said, it just kind of speaks to this sense of lack of accountability. Like, we need to understand that the American people are upset at the entire system. They're upset at both parties. They want a new generation of leadership. They are sick of speeches that go like this. I want to renew the American dream. I want us all to have an equal opportunity. I want us all to have a great life. And you've said nothing. How about specifics? Do you stand for Medicare for all? Do you stand for taxing billionaires in a wealth tax? Do you stand for cutting the bloated defense budget? Do you stand for not giving Netanyahu a blank check of military sales? Are you willing to say what happened was a genocide? Are you willing to stop Wall Street from buying up single-family homes? Are you willing to hold people accountable who've committed crimes with violating the Epstein Transparency Act? Are you going to speak truth to power? And if you're just going to give platitudes, it doesn't matter how many consultants you get.
Yeah.
To say how many, we used to need to use the word affordability. We need to use the word higher prices. That's not what lower prices. That's not what wins.
Thank you. So this is actually something that I've been very critical about as well. I think a lot of people on the Democratic Party side as well are either deliberately obfuscating Zohran Mamdani's victory in New York against all odds, against the Democratic establishment, as well as the media, who were very critical of him, or the people on the Democratic Party side who said, "Oh, this is just affordability" as a buzzword, right? And my frustration now is it's not just saying affordability is a problem. You also have to have tangible policy prescriptions, and you have to really hammer on those tangible policy prescriptions, and that's precisely what Zohran Mamdani did in New York.
You're absolutely right.
That played a formative role in his victory, like a campaign that is anchored around policies. You mentioned a couple of them. Medicare for All is a fantastic one. Obviously, taxing billionaires, a wealth tax is another great one. I'm totally on board with those issues. Do you feel like the Democrats, in the absence of unifying around these key issues, who keep leaning onto the likes of the Welcome Pack or other consultant-backed movements that are trying to dilute the message a little bit and to simply say, no, you don't understand. The people actually want marginal improvements, and here is the polling that suggests that this marginal improvement is actually much more successful. Do you feel as though that is playing a role in why the Democratic Party as a whole is still incredibly unpopular in the face of Trump's incompetence?
Yes, look, this is going to be a fight. We're not going to have kumbaya unity, Democratic Party, the lowest common denominator. I mean, you can't say I'm for affordability and then go to the billionaires and say, give me some money and I'm not going to raise your taxes. I mean, you have to stand for things. And when you stand for things, you're going to upset people. You're going to upset people if they have to pay higher taxes if they're billionaires. They may still support you, but you got to be honest with them like FDR was. You're going to upset private insurance companies if you're for Medicare for All. You're going to upset the defense industrial base if you're saying we're going to cut the defense budget. You're going to upset pharmaceuticals if you're going to say that Americans shouldn't pay a higher price than other countries, and if not, we'll take away your patents. You have to be willing to challenge economic power. And the Democrats kind of don't want to do that. So what are we going to have? We're going to have a fight in 2026 and 2028.
Yeah.
And the fight is going to be, are we just going to be a party that says Trump is bad and he's terrible?
Yeah.
Are we just going to be the party that says we're going to stop ICE agents from ripping away kids from their families and deporting innocent people? And we're going to stop the irrational tariffs that in some cases have increased food prices. And we're going to stop the assault on the Department of Education and U.S. aid and the hollowing out of NIH and the attacks on universities. All of that is needed. But I don't think it's enough. I don't want to just be the anti-Trump party and return to how things were.
Yeah.
I want to be the party that says that ordinary Americans have been screwed because we've gotten into wars overseas that have not helped them, but have helped the defense industrial base, that we have seen them suffer with medical debt at the expense where private insurance has profited, and that we are going to have a bold progressive agenda. Billionaire taxes, Medicare for All, $10 a day childcare, stop Wall Street and private equity from buying up single-family homes, 1,000 new trade schools, free public college, stop giving a blank check to Israel and Netanyahu, start investing in at home in our communities, to have a Marshall Plan for America, to build up good-paying jobs here. And by the way, stand with workers over AI. Don't have just AI eliminate all jobs. Make sure we're standing with truck drivers and warehouse workers and customer service agents, and that we have AI technology not be stopped, but be developed in a way that helps workers. We need a vision in this country. And that is what I think that the fight has to be in 2026 and 2028. The Epstein issue for me is just a proof point of character.
Yeah.
Call out the Epstein class so you can have the trust to call out a corrupt system that hasn't been working for ordinary Americans.
It's a litmus test in the same way that, like, I think Israel was a litmus test. I often would tell people that would accuse me of being so single-minded on this issue that not only was it morally repugnant, and of course I was going to stand against genocide, but that this lack of movement around Israel or the complete defense of Israel's genocide was actually a litmus test for a lot of people that caused them to check out of politics in general and refuse to vote because, as Ta-Nehisi Coates very famously said at the time, a party that doesn't want to save lives against the genocide, what makes you think they will preserve democracy? And that was the assessment that a lot of people made, even if they didn't specifically say that. But they were just like, these guys don't stand for me. They don't care about my interests at all. And I think that's where we're at. And Democrats' refusal to recognize this reckoning, this populist reckoning that's coming from the bottom up, is the reason why they're still sitting at like a tremendous negative disapproval rating. Like, it's a negative approval rating when they are supposed to, when they're supposed to be very popular, because they're supposed to be the opposition to Donald Trump.
Right.
So it's not enough. And so I'm I'm glad that you're calling this stuff out, and I really appreciate that you've noticed the tide shift that has moved away from the establishment Democrats and the way that they are trying to present themselves. You've called out Chuck Schumer quite a bit.
Well, I was the first Democrat to call on him to step down.
Yeah.
And then people said, bro, your career's over. You can't get any bill through the Senate. And then 1 week later, there's Chuck Schumer reading Ro Khanna's bill, the Epstein Transparency Act, acting for unanimous consent. You know what progressives need to learn? That when you're strong, people will bend to you. When you're strong in your convictions, then people will come to you. That's the one thing, actually, Donald Trump, as terrible as he is, understands. That if you are strong, then people will come to you. What we are is so weak. We say, oh, we can't criticize Chuck Schumer because Chuck Schumer then will not move my bill. I just showed you. You can call for Chuck Schumer to step down, and he still went and he introduced my bill with unanimous consent because I had the people on my side.
Yeah.
We have so many politicians who are more concerned about building friendships with Chuck Schumer than building friendships with our base. If we have the base, if we have the American people, if we're fighting for the right policies, the politicians will follow. I don't court the politicians, I court the people. And that's the fundamental difference in who we will have leading this party in 26 and 28. Are you going to be with the people, or is your constituency the people in Washington, D.C.?
So, question for you: in all of this calculation that's taking place right now, because there is definitely this attitude shift. I've noticed it as well. You have the likes of Graham Plattner, in spite of their inconsistencies from their past, with all this opposition research coming out. It seems like the Democratic base of support that previously would move on the whims of MSNBC, now known as MS Now, and establishment Democrats, are actually demanding more radical politics and do actually see that as the pathway towards electability. In the past, mainstream outlets for a lot of the high propensity voters on the Democratic primaries that are those who go out and vote, the older Democrats, they would be moved by the editorial board of the New York Times when the New York Times said electability is actually about about moderacy. Electability is about moderate Democrats. You have to vote for moderate Democrats. They would believe people, but I think the sequence of electoral defeats have left a lot of liberals who previously thought that moderate Democrats were the pathway to success in demanding more from Democrats, and are totally on board with much more quote unquote radical politics like Medicare for all. Which is not radical at all, obviously. Yeah. And so now you're seeing the messaging shift a little bit on the Democrat side. What do you have to say about people that will come out and be like, oh, I'm not taking any AIPAC donations now? It's great. It is a market sea change, right? Unheard of 5 years ago. People used to criticize Bernie Sanders for saying he's not going to speak at AIPAC. They would have the audacity to even say he's anti-Semitic for refusing to speak at an AIPAC
is
summit.
spending against me in my district, calling me a liar right now because I co-sponsored Rashida Tlaib's bill recognizing what the UN recognized, that the Israeli government has committed a genocide in Palestine. But look, I'm glad that politicians are saying that. I don't take any PAC money. I don't take any lobbyist money. But here's the point. That's not enough. First of all, because money can go through different organizations and different people. They may not take it, quote unquote, through AIPAC's website, but those same donors can then call some other new entity.
Or subsidiaries. The MFI is another one, Democratic Majority for Israel. And also the same exact American donor base can still go and give these guys money, as you said.
But so my point is, where do you stand on a policy? Right, I said to someone that I think that one thing that the Democratic primary will want in the future leaders of the party is just the ability to say that what happened in Gaza was a genocide by the UN. And they said, well, bro, this is going to be like the 10th or 15th priority. I said, of course, when you ask someone, what do they care about? They're going to say, I want to make sure I have health care. I want to make sure I have a job. I want to make sure I can afford my rent. And I want to make sure I have housing. I want to make sure people have a living wage. But people don't vote just on who's going to increase minimum wage or who's going to help their grocery bills. They also vote for a sense of character, of values, of who they want to be as a people. Yeah. And the issue of Gaza goes to who we are. Are we going to deny things that we all saw with our own eyes? Are we going to lie to ourselves about who we are as a people? Or are we going to aspire to be a people that treats everyone with dignity and human rights? And yes, of course, what I care about is a job and housing and living wage. But if you don't speak to people's values, if you don't speak to their sense of morality, you'll never get them knocking on doors and giving years of their lives. And that's, I think, where the disconnect happens, where these consultants look at the polls and they've never had to inspire. Yeah. They've never had to lead. They've never had to mobilize. They've never had to organize.
I mean, this is a conversation that you and I had at the DNC specifically on the issue of Gaza, but also beyond that on immigration. If you recall, one of the major pain points for someone like myself was the anger that I had for the Democrats and their inability to deal with the issue of immigration because they were so scared of what they were seeing in the polls about 60% of Americans being in favor of mass deportation. At the time, I said to you that this is going to change inevitably, and then there will be Democrats who were pro more stringent, the Democrats that leaned into the white nativist hysteria concocted by the Republicans instead of counter messaging against that. We're going to look inconsistent or hypocritical, and we're there now. Public attitude has swung dramatically in the opposite direction. 79% of Americans favor immigration. It's the highest approval rating that immigration has gotten in the history of the United States of America, and that only took a year of black bagging and kidnapping and mass deportation initiatives that were implemented. So the question I have both for immigration and actually, you know what? Let's just stay on immigration for now. What do you think is going to be the broader Democratic Party sentiment at the national level against immigration now? Do you think that it's still going to demand some kind of middle of the ground approach where they're like, yeah, some of these guys are actually rapist monsters and we do have to deport them, implying that Joe Biden's administration wasn't doing that, which is a lie. Of course they were. If someone is doing a crime, immigrant, non-immigrant, they're going to get prosecuted. Or do you feel as though Democrats will be more bold and question the legitimacy of the vitriolic, racialized, white nativist, anti-immigrant sentiment that was fomented in this country?
Look, I'm the son of immigrants. My parents came here from India. When I still go on a plane, even when I'm going in a congressional delegation, my mom says, please don't lose your passport. I say, Mom, I got the military with me. There's such a fear that immigrants have of loss. And I saw how they adjusted in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And we had a very welcoming community. But the sense of having an accent, the sense of when you go in a restaurant and they would always order and say, no, we don't want the ice. And I said, Mom, they serve ice in these restaurants. I mean, you got to just get used to the ice. And I understand what it's like to be an immigrant. And here's what I know. Immigrants make this country better. Immigrants contribute. Immigrants are patriots. Immigrants work hard. Immigrants start small businesses. My mom would tell me, learn every single word in the English language because that's what's going to make you a patriot and contribute to this country. Most immigrants want their kids to learn everything about this country, to contribute to this country, and I am tired.
And they work hard.
They work hard.
They work hard to be a part of this country.
And I'm tired of this our party starting with immigrants as the problem.
Yeah.
As opposed to what immigrants do. If I were in charge when they were talking about eating the dogs and cats, you know what I would have done? I would have said our candidates should go to Springfield, Ohio, and they should stand with those Haitian immigrants, and they should start to talk about what those Haitian immigrants are actually doing.
Humanizing the migrant population against all the racialized animus.
Instead, every trip we took was to the border. I'm not saying, of course, we need a border, a secure border. I'm not saying don't talk about that. But why are you always leading with that? Lead with what the community is doing. Now, the second thing is, you got to be with a place of conviction. I got crushed a couple months after the election. I went on Bill Maher's show, and I said I voted against the Lake and Riley Act. And I said that because even if someone has committed a criminal act in this country, we have due process. We don't just take someone and deport them. And that's why I voted against Lake and Riley. And the audience basically clearly I lost that debate. I mean, if you look at the clips, you'll see
where are they at now?
My team was like, what, you got crushed.
Where are those liberals at now on this?
But you know what? I stuck my guns. And now the vote looks like it was the right vote. Now everyone's come around. And you know what? The people who voted for Lake and Raleigh, they just hope everyone forgets.
Yes.
And most of the country will forget, but progressives don't forget. What do I mean by a progressive? A progressive is simply someone who looks at this person's record, who looks beyond the rhetoric. Why was Bernie Sanders so popular? Because he had voted for the same thing for 30, 40 years. People do their homework because they don't want just someone who's going to say the right thing in the right moment with the trend lines, who sees the wave of Bernie or Mamdani and says, how do I catch this wave? They want people who actually, when they get there, are going to fight. Because even if you win, the fight then just begins against the special interests are going to come after you. And if you don't have the record to stand up on shows like Bill Maher, how are you going to have the record when you get to the Congress or the Senate or the White House? We need people who have conviction in our politics. And what is exciting to me is all these young progressives running across the country. Graham Plattner in Maine, Abdul Al-Saeed in Michigan, Kat Abdul Ghazala in Chicago. So many. I mispronounced her name, but we've endorsed dozens across the country. These bold young progressives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's where the momentum is. And it's very clear that like the establishment Democrats are trying to lean into that momentum, not fully understanding exactly why there's so much momentum or so much grassroots backing for a lot of these candidates, and simply trying to lean into that with aesthetic postures instead of demanding more, instead of openly calling out what Israel has done as genocide, openly saying that Israel is an apartheid state, and demanding change or reconsidering the way that we have aligned with Israel in perpetuity. They just simply say, oh, I'm not taking any AIPAC money. And that's wishy-washy and it's marginal. It's still good that it's like moving the needle in the appropriate direction, but it's too little too late. And I think that like you've said over and over again, Democrats need to stop being afraid of leading. Listen, we have a saying in our community, at least, that being a leftist is being right just too early. And, you get punished for it endlessly, whether it be my opinions on Israel, whether it be my opinions on how the Democrats mishandled immigration and the conversation around the immigration. This is something that I was very critical on the Biden administration on from April 2021 when they first noticed that a lot of people were getting agitated and they thought, oh, if we just don't address this at all, if we don't do anything that Joe Biden ran on in 2020 and defeated Donald Trump on, the first 100 days of immigration was this comprehensive agenda leaning into amnesty and things of that nature. But they saw an overwhelming amount of people come to the border, as usually the case whenever there is a non-Republican in charge. They didn't know how to handle it. And this issue got completely out of control. At the time, I said they should have prosecuted Governor Greg Abbott for trafficking human beings across state lines in a deliberate effort to gum up the works. The already established the immigration processing was made even more difficult deliberately without even corresponding with the other states and officials from other states in an attempt to exhaust their funds and exhaust their resources. And it was very successful. The very fact that Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott were able to do this without any scrutiny whatsoever is incredible, is insane to me. That Democrats should have punished them. And then they should have reappropriated funds adequately to ensure that, one, this doesn't happen again, and two, the immigrants that were already being processed now in places like New York, Rhode Island, and many other places actually had the localities there actually had the proper funds to make sure that they were integrated expeditiously and could work. And not be this like exhaustive strain on the limited resources that they had. Very frustrating to see this all the time. But one last question I have for you, because we've already I've taken up a lot of your time.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do this. Hours straight.
I do it for 10 hours, 8 hours.
That's crazy.
It's just,
you got that's but
I'm a very stubborn person.
I've been watching some of the comments, and you got a very educated and informed community, and they're the ones. people out there are the ones who are finally being heard. I mean, we're going to change things.
They're nerds. That's why. It's a Saturday afternoon, and they're sitting in here listening to me talk to a congressperson. They're not. I wouldn't say they're like the average American politics appreciator.
But they're the activists. They're the ones who will be knocking on doors. They'll be on social media. Look, we have a chance, a historic chance, finally, to build a progressive movement in this country. To finish the job that Bernie Sanders did. I endorsed him in 2016. I co-chaired with Nina Turner and Ben Cohen his campaign in 2020. I was one of his national co-chairs. And we should have won. The country would be a different place. We wouldn't have had the mess in Gaza. We didn't. We came close. We can finish the job in 26 and 28 and build an FDR-like progressive coalition. And that's going to happen because of people here. I mean, this is the energy of the movement. And with Zoran winning, it shows anything is possible. The energy is on our side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you fear that that foreign governments may take action against you beyond simply trying to disparage you and dumping boatloads of funds into your opposition?
Well, look, they're going after me both because of the Epstein issue and because of my votes and comments on Gaza. And the tech, some of the tech billionaires don't like me these days because I said that we should be for the workers and not just have AI put data centers everywhere when it's increasing electricity costs and using water costs. And I said that the tech companies need to be paying for that and need to have renewable energy and need to have water use standards. And so some people started to come after me there. And so I have taken on some powerful interests. My grandfather spent 4 years in jail as part of Gandhi's independence movement, literally in jail. He was jailed twice. And the challenges as an American politician pale in comparison to that. So when I think about, what risks I'm taking, what issues I'm fighting for, I think nothing I do will come close to the courage that my grandfather had. And by that, I don't just mean my grandfather. I mean all of the people who have sacrificed for this nation, whether they're people who fought in World War II and scaled the cliffs of Normandy, whether they were people who were beaten in the Edmund Pettus Bridge, whether they were part of decolonizing movements around the world. We have a chance to do a beautiful thing in America, to build a truly multiracial democracy of equality and dignity of every human being, to move beyond the colonizer's model of the world, to have a world that recognizes the dignity and human rights of every nation, every person. And that's what we're building here. We are incredibly privileged to be in the United States of America to have that chance.
Yeah, I always say, look, while white supremacy is definitely a resilient galvanizing factor for many Americans, Americans are much, much more open-minded about diversity than even our European counterparts are. And that is precisely the reason why, in spite of Donald Trump's popularity, in spite of how much he hammered on, undocumented migrants doing all these crimes and whatnot, which is, pure manufactured hysteria, manufactured outrage, that Americans by and large are very inconsistent in the way that they see the world. And there's a sea of contradictions there for the average American politics understander, the median voter. And that's precisely the reason why the very same people, if you were to ask them, the very same people that were holding up even the mass deportation, deport them all placards at the Trump rallies, if you were to ask them, do you think an immigrant that's been here for 10 years that has done no crimes whatsoever should have amnesty after, background checks? They would all collectively say, absolutely. And I'm not making this up. I'm not making up a hypothetical person. There's evidence to suggest that this is the reality because that's what the polls say.
Well, it's not just, it is the polls, I'm sure. But you know how I know that? Because I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. 99% white Christian. I was one of the only Indian American Hindu kids on the street. And I used to play Little League, baseball. I couldn't hit. They used to put me ninth. When I used to go up to hit, they used to say, watch the bunt. I was so bad at hitting. But I knew those folks. And I knew they were decent and kind and welcoming, and that they wanted me and my family to fit in. They didn't understand everything, but it was a good community. We are a decent and good people that has been exploited by politicians who are protecting an Epstein class, who are protecting rich and powerful people and blaming immigrants, blaming foreign countries, blaming LGBT and trans people because they don't want to deal with the wealth and the power that is shafting folks. And if we come in with truth, if we come in with honesty, and if we say, look, we are a decent multiracial democracy that can respect each other, and we are sick of having our money go to Argentina or Netanyahu. We're sick of the wars in Iraq or Venezuela or Libya. We want Medicare for all. We want $10 a day childcare. We want to tax these billionaires when you got $18 trillion in Rose District. We want childcare, healthcare, education for every American. Then I think we can inspire this country. And I call it economic patriotism, but I believe it's a patriotic vision of what America is supposed to be, of how you can have an Indian American of Hindu faith talking to someone of Muslim faith on a Saturday afternoon and inspiring a nation. Let's be the best
in a room filled with Christmas decorations.
With Christmas. There you go.
But no, absolutely. It's what you're describing is coming fairly close to class first politics in general. This doesn't mean that you write off, other marginalized identities or other marginalized groups in this bargain, but it's more so to bring voters from the other side without compromising on those values. And I think that in the absence of Democrats engaging in this sort of class first politics, they often simply engage in this aesthetic posture towards like protecting migrants or protecting trans people. And they're the first to write them off, as we saw in the aftermath of the last general election defeat, where they were like, oh, well, we were just like too protective over trans people. It's like, that wasn't even a point of contention at all. You never did. And the only reason why you were defined by those policies is because you were not defined by any of the policies that you wanted to put forward, because in the absence of being defined by easy to understand policies like the ones that you suggested, of course your opposition is going to frame you in whichever way they want to, and you're going to be and the public is going to see you by your opposition's framing, and that's precisely what happened.
Well, when, Dr. King is the most eloquent on this, and I don't remember the exact speech, but he says, when the white man said, well, how do I feed my family? They fed him Jim Crow. When the white man said, how am I going to have a voice and why should I accept my place? They fed him Jim Crow. And what King diagnosed was that systemic racism was the answer to mask massive inequality.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is build a kind of movement that Dr. King was building with Bayard Rustin and the freedom movement, that Jesse Jackson was building, that had white working class, black working class, Latino, people wealthy or not, who believe that you can have a multiracial democracy with dignity for everyone and not just wealth concentrated in the hands of a few who have impunity. And to get it back to Epstein, the ultimate impunity is if you feel you can rape young girls and get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Ro Khanna, for coming on.
Thank you.
And giving us your time on this otherwise very busy Saturday.
I love it.
Assume.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, to you as well.